Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America, brought to you by Accuracy in Academia. I'm your host, Don Irvine, joined by my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Good morning and welcome to meteorological summer.
Do that, yeah. I did have to check after been kind of since I spent half the month of May in Japan and Korea, and then coming back and just seeing what my lawn looked like, and we talked a little bit about the rain, and so as far as I can tell, based on what I looked up, was that we had a lot of rain compared to the 30-year average.
Yeah, we did. We had a ton of rain.
Yeah, I can't remember. I think it came out to be something what 9 inches or thereabouts instead of 4.7 or whatever. Anyway, it was a pretty steep jump. And I'm looking at now, the weather app on the iPhone is pretty. It's not really very accurate, especially for the 10-day weather forecast or whatever they've got on this thing. But I looked at it this morning, and I'm like, oh, it's showing a chance of rain. I think it was starting Friday, going through next Wednesday, and I'm like, I what that better change.
Yeah, it's supposed to be an inch of rain on Saturday alone, so that's a lot of rain.
Yeah, we're not gonna have too much of those wet stuff, and then there are parts of the country that can't get the rain that they want or need. So it's like, yes, we've got more than enough lately. I think our plants and our flowers are probably fine. Please send it to the areas of the country that are having these technical drought situations and whatnot. And so, yeah, I don't know. It is what it is because it's weather. It's changeable. It's variable. We never really know what we're going to get sometimes. So, but I like living here as opposed to a lot of other parts of the country where I visited. I like the change of seasons, and all in all, it's pretty moderate for the year.
Yeah, that's right. Enough extreme to where you get a taste of it, right? You got a taste of extreme winter. You get a taste, of extreme summer. We usually have a week or two where it's, high 90s and everybody complains, and then it cools back down, and it's just summer.
Yeah, I mean, and then I think it was on Friday. I'm getting these alerts on my phone, and like, tornado watch in the area, and I'm like, this is Montgomery County. We don't get those things normally, but I think we've been getting more of those. But it's a watch. It's a watch versus a warning and things like that. But it just kind of make you wonder about the variability of weather, and just like exactly how close are we to any of these things actually happening. I don't know if you got a watch or anything like that where you live, but it was just like, it just seems like we're getting more of these lately.
Yeah, we get. I was in Scranton over the weekend, and it rained up there until, like most of Saturday, and then Sunday was pretty nice.
I have been to Scranton, when my kids were younger. I kind of vaguely remember like there was a train museum up there, but I'm not quite sure what else was up there.
There was a train museum, and there's like one of our players went on a walking tour of all the places that the show The Office was set there, and like all the things the elements of Scranton they show in the show. They went and found all that stuff, and like the sign that's always there and whatnot. And but to get to my hotel, the hotel upstate, a beautiful hotel, was remade. It's like the Union Station of Scranton was remade into a really nice hotel down there. And but to get there, you go on 81 till you get to the President Biden Expressway, and then you take that until you get off on Biden Street. So it was pretty. We got a lot of Biden in our, but we also got they got really good food up there. The people were nice. Got to see some baseball, on the side. So a good weekend.
No extra signs like on the Biden stuff, like please remember where you are. Yeah. Don't forget
and
us.
It was cold, right? It was, I mean, like the Saturday night, Sunday morning were cold. I mean, not just cool, but like down in the low 40s.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that's the other part of it is that the weather has been overnight has been kind of on the cool side. We haven't really seen it be kind of what I would consider typical weather for this time of the year. Yesterday was a pretty warm day, so that was nice, but we're finally getting around and going to turn the corner on that. I'm trying to think. I think that's where the late Mal Klein was from that area.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I think The Office probably is the one thing that probably puts Scranton on the map. Otherwise, it's like, why are you going through the mountains and doing all that stuff?
Yeah, it's way up there. It's 1,800 feet up or whatever.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember a lot of fog when you get to the, just depends on the time, it's just like, yeah, that's an area that I'm not planning on visiting again anytime soon.
Well, basketball kind of makes you go some places.
Right. Yeah. You have to travel
otherwise
around.
go. That end up being pretty cool, and it was pretty cool.
Well, no, I mean that's the type of thing. I mean, you get to do those things, and why not? Get to see other parts of America that you wouldn't normally go to. It's not something that would normally wouldn't be. Scranton would not be on my bucket list, but if something took me there, you go there, and that's kind of why I went there. Something took me there for business, and that was probably I think like 1989, 90, I don't know, but it's like never been back.
Yeah, about the last time I was there.
All right. Well, we're now into June, and things just keep chugging along on the calendar. So Ukraine launched this amazing, surprising drone attack on Russia from inside Russia.
Right.
This has sparked a lot of debate about asymmetric warfare. What is going on? They had a very long-term plan. They had this was planned over a pretty long time period in order to do this. They had to smuggle these things in. I think they had them in trucks or whatever as well,
and then build them on the inside.
Yeah. So they got this done, and they destroyed a bunch of planes and all these kind of things. But one of the questions, is not just. I mean, Russia's, Putin's not very happy with this, but hello, Vlad, what did you do previously to Ukraine? Did you not strike and kill civilians fairly recently? So, and now you're complaining that Ukraine is fighting back. Sorry, you're not getting any sympathy from me.
Well, here's the thing about it, though. So the planes that they damaged are nuclear capable planes, right? The nuclear reduction treaties require you to keep those planes out in the open, right? You can't put them up. Like ours are not put up either. So Ukraine doesn't really have anything comparable to that. So Russia trying to follow the rules of a nuclear arms agreement, were punished for it by this. So yeah, they got away with one. They pulled one over, but what do you think is coming out of Russia now, right? Because they kind of broke a rule. They kind of did a thing that you're telling the Russians what do you want them to do out of this, right? Give up? They're not going to give up, so they're going to retaliate in a way that makes you never want to have an idea like that again, right? So I don't know. I mean, everybody's clapping for him now, but I think we are not far from Ukraine being in very bad shape. Or the other thing that I keep thinking about as this goes on and on is I don't think that Zelensky will be in charge of Ukraine all that much longer. I think either the Russians are going to do one of their, it's time for an election and here's a candidate. And that's probably a good idea to vote for this candidate. And or us, or we'll undermine him. But I think both sides are getting impatient with him. And
yeah, I mean, I
destabilizing governments.
Yeah, I didn't see the White House reaction to this, but I think it was only that a week or so ago when when Russia had their attack on Ukraine, Trump is out there saying like, I don't know what the hell, he's doing out there.
Yeah.
He's killing people and stuff like that. Maybe the same could be said for Zelensky in terms of what, I'm trying to negotiate a peaceful end to all this stuff, and you're doing the tit for tat stuff. Both sides have got to just stop this so we can get to the table and do things. But yeah, I mean, look, you're right. I mean, Russia, they get attacked like this, they're not going to sit on their hands.
Right.
There will be something. They'll be, as I say, there'll be hell to pay. Don't exactly know what it'll be, but the White House better be prepared to see yet another attack from Russia on Ukraine this time around. So this war probably, is not going to end anytime soon right now, while they're kind of in this, tit for tat back and forth movement on this. But one of the questions, I guess, that was also raised from this attack was, just what they were able to pull off. What does it mean for, for warfare around the world overall? I mean, even the U.S., does this mean the U.S. is potentially vulnerable from something like this from someone? Other countries are vulnerable, so it's
the new vulnerability. The drones are tough to defend against them, because you're not really shooting people, right? You're gonna have to, there's someone controlling it from distant, right? So yeah, it makes it tough, but it's like it's changing warfare dramatically. Like I heard a 2-star general speak last week, and he said, one of the things he says, like the first day of the war, Russians lost 11 helicopters. He said 11 helicopters are basically done as a warfare instrument because of drones, right? They're easy marks. So he said they'll be in the rear moving people around and stuff, but you won't see them used in combat anymore. And so there's all kinds of, adjustments that are going to have to be made. But these guys, their whole life is making these adjustments. So, expect something to happen. Yeah. Part of me says that, but part of me says, Murphy's Law, if something can go wrong, it will, right? Stein's corollary says things that can't keep going on won't keep going on. And I think we're almost to the category where this is a Stein's corollary deal.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell. I mean, I understand, what Bob is saying here, because, just when you thought maybe they were going to, they've been sitting down, they've been, theoretically negotiating something, then Russia goes and attacks Ukraine, and now Ukraine comes back and hits these planes and whatnot. And you're like, okay, well, we're really not as close as we thought we were. I'm sure the Trump administration is a little frustrated with all of this at this point. But it does seem it's hard to see where the goal line is here, where the end of this war is at this point, because of this recent escalation. But it can turn around too. I mean, it can very easily, all of a sudden, something can happen, and therefore, Russia, which I think we've talked about, seemingly has the advantage here, could close the gap and seal it off, and finally say, this is we're just going to make this happen, whether or not it's going to be by force or by negotiation. They're because we're up to almost 1,200 days now, so
yeah.
This is once again far longer than Vladimir Putin expected.
Really.
Yeah, anyone thought. And I think there are a lot of people that are tiring of this whole thing, including people in the Ukraine who are just, they're definitely war weary from this, and they're just, they're seeing their country decimated by everything that's going on out there. So it'll be interesting to see. Now, we also, at the same time, we have, they're doing a prisoner swap, and that'll include, apparently, I guess, dead prisoners as well. But at least there's some movement there. Though I can't remember what it was. Were they doing mostly the older soldiers or something like that? I think rather than the younger ones or something. So, but that's that's at least some progress. I
Right.
mean,
That's right.
exchange some prisoners. That's a little bit of good faith there. Gives you some hope that maybe there's some traction there for something to go on, one way or the other. But yeah, I just drones. I mean,
Yeah, the other thing, the problem here is, is so we signed this minerals, rare earth minerals deal with Ukraine. So now, this had reached a point where the Europeans were in the pilot's seat of trying to end this. Right? It was the Europeans dealing with Russia. Signing with that puts us back in the middle of it. So now you don't hear anything about the Europeans brokering peace or buttressing Ukraine or whatever. It's all us again. So I think that's another thing. It's like Trump he's in a spot now because he can't really give up on those minerals. Like, we got to have that. I mean, that was kind of the whole deal, right? And so I think he's looking for a way to preserve that. But it's like, we now have to protect the parts of Ukraine where that is, right? And they're not under Russian control now, and we have to keep them from getting destroyed or coming under Russian control.
Yeah, I meant to look into this more because, like, on this rare earth minerals, but that's always people are talking about that China, Ukraine, things like that. I have not read deeply enough in there to say. So we have these countries that have got these rare earth minerals. But are they also the same countries that process the minerals? Do we have capacity?
No, we're going to process them here. I mean, that's get them out of there, bring them here.
We have the capacity to do that.
Well, that's what the plan is. Right. That's right.
Right, and that's a debate, right? I mean, that has become an increasing debate.
But it is a debate. But this is a chance to shore ourselves up on rare earths, right? I mean, the Chinese have 70% of them. We have 3%. Greenland has 11%, which is why we were interested in Greenland. So I mean, there's not. So that's 70, 81, 84%. So we're down to 16% of all the rare earth minerals that we're looking for, and the people who have them, we're going to have to get uncomfortable to make sure. I think Trump has identified this as a huge strategic liability for us, a huge strategic challenge for us. If people can cut us off from, the things we need to make microprocessors, you really put a pretty good hurt on this country, economically, militarily, whatever. So now you're going to have to preserve it.
Yeah, I mean, but back, and to Bob's point, though, it's like, what is the willingness, to continue to pay for this war? Well,
now you'll have, in theory, the left, which has been for paying for it all along. It'll be interesting to see if they switch sides when, so they're not on Trump's side about anything. So there's a pretty good chunk of Republicans who would be willing to help Ukraine in the near term, especially MAGA people who want to help Trump, and people who more traditional Republicans who want to fight the Russians.
Yeah, but it's this whole.
There's a limit to it, and you'd have to put the coalition back together because it's really not together now. So Bob has a point, and and that may prove trickier than it seems. But there are people there waiting to be approached with a plan that has an end point to it and a chance of success.
Yeah, and I think the same thing is happening, throughout Europe too. Though I mean, a lot of countries have poured a lot of money into this war to help Ukraine, but I think they're all kind of beginning to ask, is like, how much more money is it going to take for that? It's like,
right.
Wars are extremely costly.
Yeah.
And this has become a slog, a quagmire, whatever you want to call it. And so this is sucking a lot of money out of a lot of countries where that money could have been used for other purposes.
Right.
and everything like that. So, I don't know. I mean, I just see that at some point in time, there will be a growing chorus, from both sides to say, we've got to end this whole thing. But I think I guess part of it too, as long as people feel that Ukraine, is we're fighting for we're helping them with their freedom and their independence against Vladimir Putin and dictatorship and thuggery, or whatever you want to call it, or however you want to label it, because Putin is not all that popular with a lot of politicians. So but that may change, right? I mean, that
Right.
they just may finally say, we're gonna pull the plug and let just things work the way they're going to work, and let's move on. We have invested billions and billions of dollars, and what do we have as a result of this, to show for this? So I don't know. So more is yet to come on that. All right. Yeah. See, that's part of the problem too, right?
Yeah, that's right. That is part of the problem, because especially with Ukraine, one of the most corrupt countries in the world, and there's already a lot of evidence that the last batch, the previously sent batches, have not been spent efficiently.
Yeah, I mean, this seems to be something that has been going on for decades, if not longer, in terms of when you supply this money to these countries, how much of this is getting to where it needs to go, right? I mean, the same thing has gone to, has been, very evident with, kind of like humanitarian aid, food, and all these other things, corrupt governments around the world, particularly in Africa and things like that. The governments, take the bulk of it, and get the people who really need it get very little. So, the situation doesn't get resolved as a result. So, yeah, but I'm not sure. Will that ever really be solved in terms of governments, kind of skimming the money off the top of this kind of aid?
And if you account for it, I think that's part of the project with DOGE is to set it up, and the left is all spiking the ball because Elon's pulling back from the White House and so forth. But Elon was always, he said when he started, I'm not going to do this for a little while, right, and go back. But he has established a culture in the country that we're in the government that we're going to use big data collection and number crunching techniques to find waste. And when we find the waste, we're going to root it out. So, his legacy, if the Republicans will keep doing it, and the Trump administration will keep doing it, will be among the most significant of any American who's ever participated in government, because, or anybody who's ever participated in American government, because, if we actually get accountable about how we spend all the money, and we make feints at it. You have the database of all the checks written and so forth, right? But if you actually have somebody, who's analyzing it every day, then you're going to get a different result. You're going to get, and there are people actually called out and either fired or put in jail or whatever. You're going to get people's attention. I think that, like, all these bureaucratic things that these people are doing, like, we're catching theft, we're catching misuse of funds left and right. Somebody's got to get frog marched, right? It doesn't have to be many people, but if you give one of those guys, two of those guys, a 10-year sentence for something, right, then all the other bureaucrats are like, no more, right? It doesn't look getawayable anyway, anymore. So I want out. So that these are people who can be deterred by sentencing, right? Most of the time, like they say, the murderers, death penalty or life in prison doesn't really matter to the average murderer on the street, but this does matter. These are people who will look at what's going on and say, no, not me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with regard to DOGE, I mean, yeah, I mean, they didn't, they didn't really get, in terms of savings, like, like Musk had thrown that figure out of 2 trillion, which was really not going to be achievable under the current standard.
Yeah, be achievable. They're putting in a process that's going to keep going on. So, the initial splash got what the initial splash got, but this is going to be going on from now on. And so you will eventually get, hundreds of billions of dollars of savings.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't. Yeah, I mean, I think that's part of the thing you have to realize is that any kind of savings, this is going to be a long-term type of a deal. You've got to have kind of the DOGE type of thinking and everything that happens within government, and then keep working at it and hacking away at this monstrosity that we have, that we've allowed to really, grow by leaps and bounds over the last 4 or 5 decades. Every time we talk about stuff like this, I go back to, my father, who worked for the government, worked for the Federal Reserve for, a number of years. And even when he was working for the Federal Reserve in the 1970s, when he was, finishing up his career, he was complaining about just the bureaucracy. I mean, just too many people.
Right.
Just 50 years ago, he was talking about it, right? And it's only gotten worse. I mean, our federal government, our state governments, our local governments, they've all been, they're overstaffed with middle management and all these people that, don't really have a great role, something of real importance.
Don't add much to the deal.
They don't. I mean, they don't. They just they add.
Maryland, where you live, the government's a jobs program.
Yeah,
it's basically there, and it's basically grown in order to have this big, middle class, managerial class living in Montgomery County. They're all making nice salaries off the taxpayers, right? It's not, it's a thing. It can't be replicated, in very many places. Like, Montgomery County, it's a little bit of a fantasy situation. You have so many people who are so wealthy that you can afford to be, not very careful about how you spend public dollars.
Yeah, I mean, Montgomery County is just out of control when it comes to the budget, because they are the the poster child for tax and spend.
Yeah,
and they're just extremely reckless in the way they do things, and there's just no way you need all these people throughout local and state government to do all this stuff. As you said, jobs program. When Bob Ehrlich came in, he tried to take a whack at that. He used attrition as the main way of doing it, but it's basically like, a job is empty, we're not going to fill it unless we really need to fill it, and then hopefully that job just goes away. And then you start getting smaller government, but maybe more efficient government out of this. And then you don't have to tax people so much because you're not supporting so many people. Why was Governor, Wes Moore and the Democrats, that ruled Maryland, why were they all upset about DOGE and Trump? Because they were scared that, of all the jobs that were going away, that could be eliminated. And what were they going to do with all these people, that we have, because, Maryland obviously has a big federal workforce. Like Virginia's got a good sized federal workforce.
Virginia has the biggest.
They've been scared to death about, what's been going on here, because no one is held them to account.
Right. See, that's the thing. You gotta have penalties. You gotta punish people for doing this, or people will keep doing it. And if you will punish them, if you will go all the way through and punish them, then you will deter a lot of corruption.
Yeah.
You got to do it. You got to show there's a price to be paid.
And it's a shame too. We have so many government employees on all levels who don't do a lot, collect nice paychecks, and don't feel guilty about it.
That's right.
It's just like, I mean, there is that old axiom, right? An honest day's pay for an honest day's work. That doesn't apply for a lot of government workers. Right. There's a lot of them out there who they're more than happy to collect the pay, even if they have little or nothing to do. There are jobs that have been somewhat phased out or whatever, but they're for political reasons, budgetary reasons. That's the other part of the problem too, right? Is the budgets, is that, departments want to maintain certain levels of funding, so they keep people around so they can try to collect more money with the next year. So there's once again, so that'll go back to accountability. There's no one wants to be held to account for ballooning the budgets by stuffing the channel with a bunch of worthless, useless.
We don't incentivize efficiency. We don't reward it. We're like, And I remember like when I worked on the Hill, like 3 times a year, I would go to lunch and I'd come back and there'd be a brand new computer on my desk. Right. And it's like the other one was, I'm not a graphic artist, right? I'm not someone who puts any real demand on the capabilities of a computer, right? It's basically a glorified typewriter to me. I'm a text guy, right? So, what are you doing? Like, I didn't ask for it, but they had to spend this money, right? They had to spend their budget,
Right,
so
right. That's that right. You get the closer you get to September 30th, the more wasteful spending there is.
Yeah. And so why don't we just say, hey, it turns out we can do this for $1 million less a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do the taxpayers a favor, somebody out there, it's like, let's.
But the other side of that though is there has to be some evidence that if they do this, right, because eventually you'll get to a point where, I do need a computer change, but I don't get one, right? If you keep cutting, it's like, oh, make do with the one that doesn't really work. Okay. But, do we reward this? Do we do anything for you if you make that happen, right? If you lower those costs. So you have to incentivize it. It's not going to happen on its own. Right now, the incentives say, keep it coming.
Yeah. Well, the Internal Revenue Service and a lot of other agencies, they're, a lot of their systems that run and process returns and all that, they're antiquated. They're terrible. And we've spent very little money on those, but instead it was just, oh, well, we need to add 100,000 more people to the, it's like, how about you fix some of the basic problems?
Right. See, that's the other thing that's happened with DOGE, right? Is they've said, okay, these guys' computer system does not do what they need it to do, or it's siloed into a bunch of parts that can't talk to each other, but need to talk to each other, right? So you get these things where they don't even know about the inefficiency. So now the thing that the left is all hollering about is this Palantir, right? Palantir. What they do is they organize databases. Like, why is that bad? Why do you not want government databases organized to deliver efficiency? Oh, they'll have a profile of you. They're organizing your profile. It's like, guess what, buddy? They have a profile on you, right? Between your tax information and your school information and all the information the government requires you to give it, right? They have all the information they need on you, right? They could shut you down if they want to, right? So it's like no, don't get organized, because if you get organized, you can identify inefficiency and get rid of it. And they don't, these are people, they're fighting for inefficiency, right? They're going to war for inefficiency.
Yeah, look, we have people who go to IRS offices to try to iron out things, and they wait for long periods of time, completely unnecessary, Social Security kind of thing like this. If they would spend the money and modernize the systems and quit keeping them so siloed, answers could be given fairly rapidly. Could it be done securely online? I think so. The government has gone to a system called ID.me, I believe it is, and that's how you identify yourself. You have to set up this account, and then you use that. You can go in and see your tax returns and stuff like that. I think maybe the same ID.me works for my Medicare, to go in and pay my Medicare premium for now and stuff like that. So those things are getting better, but they're still way behind. And if you're Elon Musk, you're like, okay, I knew we were in bad shape. I didn't know we were in this bad a shape.
Right. That's right. That's basically what he has said.
Yeah. And it's like, and they're government workers, they're going to protect their space, right? That is a natural reflex. Is like, oh, well, we can't do that because that might mean, 100 fewer jobs in my department. Maybe that's more efficient, but, we can't let loose 100 people, and we can't see our budget be reduced by $1 million. It's we have just gotten into this horrible cycle, where why do we have
big government for big government's sake, right? That's
right.
Basically what it is.
Yeah.
And so one guy comes along and says, hey, let's just clean up what we got and see how much we can say. Oh no.
Right. And it's like, why do we have a isn't it about a $7 trillion budget now for the federal government, or close to it? It's like, where did this come from? I mean, this is just absolutely insane. I understand that some of this was accelerated thanks to the pandemic, but we overspent, during the pandemic, and got into this whole thing that that basically set new baselines, and that's part of the problem. They keep working from these baselines. It's like, well, this is what it is, and so we'll cut from this, but you're really not cutting when you're cutting from those baselines, because like those things were already inflated to begin with, and it is such a mess. It makes me want to kind of bang my head against the wall or whatever. I get so frustrated, but once again, goes back to what you said, until we hold them to account, until there is some penalty for mismanagement of the resources and allocation, or
incentivize them for doing it right.
Incentivize them for cutting the size of government. I mean, why not incentivize them to to reduce the size of your department? Give them a little bonus if you can run the show the government you can run it more efficiently. If some people think they're going to get more money, they might actually be willing to sacrifice a few of their fellow colleagues who are not as worth as much in order to get a little bit bigger piece of their pie there. But then overall, the government and the taxpayers save money. Move that needle in the other direction, because we have been just going in the wrong direction on the spending side for too long.
Well, they are. I guess you saw they collected $22 billion in tariffs last month, and we're actually running a surplus right now. We're taking in more than we're spending.
Yeah, I want to see how that continues to play out. I mean, April, any figures that come out of April will always be affected by tax receipts.
Because people pay the taxes, right?
Yeah, tax receipts, but. And then Trump keeps moving the tariff line back and forth, so I'm not quite sure exactly where we are on that. But it's still out there. That's not.
And inflation is doing what? Going down, right?
For now, right?
So
for now,
people tell you the tariffs make the inflation go up. Remember what's happening right now. That they're not making it go up.
For me, I want to see about a 6-month. Thing. I want to see what happened, where we are, say maybe even in August or September, where are we exactly where are we? If inflation hasn't really nudged or it's gone down, if receipts are up, if the deficit is, has been reduced, then I think you can say that whatever the tariff policy is that's in effect at that time will have been a success in that sense. If jobs, our unemployment hasn't soared and other things, interest rates, they may stay stubbornly high for a little while, because I think, as long as Jerome Powell's at the Fed, he wants more clarity in terms of how this is all affecting the economy.
He doesn't want Trump to get any credit for the economy.
I think if he sees that inflation stays at or near their target, then he'll have no choice but to lower interest rates. But it's the zigging and zagging of Trump that makes it hard for economists or anybody else to kind of really predict, where you're going, because it seems like, one sector is, having an issue, tariff, and then he takes that off, and then it goes to another sector, and there's that, and we're, and we don't know really what the end result will be with the courts who've been getting involved. There's another comment here. Yeah, I mean, that's a good point too there, because, well, look, I have no love lost for higher education and the way that they operate financially. That it's a rigged game for the institutions and the money that they take in. The student loan program is a sham.
FAFSA. What FAFSA is?
Yeah, the federal student loan. They basically give you the money.
Yeah, if you're below a certain income level or whatever.
Yeah, they pretty much basically.
So what's happening there is they're giving them the money. So you have people, who have basically no money going to $30,000 schools because the government makes up the money. So if you quit paying out all that money, the first year or two, it'll be kind of chaotic, right? But then what are the schools going to have to do? You're going to have to go down on the price, right? You can't charge people $30,000 to go to a year for college if they don't have it and they can't pay it, right? The government's not going to pay it. Then that tuition cost is going to have to start matching the expenses to some extent. It's like, if it doesn't cost but this much to put it on, then that's what you're going to have to sell it for. And then, on the other side, they're cleaning out the DEI and all that stuff too, which are big administrative expenses for colleges, but to provide no benefit for students.
Oh yeah, look, you've struck right at the heart of something that has bothered me for a long, long time. It's just the prices that a lot of these colleges and universities charge is a fairy tale. To me, it's an arbitrary amount that is set, and it's part of a game because they know that the federal government provides these loans, right? Because of the student loan program, people are encouraged to go ahead and borrow to help meet.
And this is not borrow. This is give.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, and then, but then you've got, say, Harvard is at 50,000 a year or whatever it is, and then you get these scholarships or whatever, and look, it's only going to be 30,000 because you're such a bright kid, right? Well, the 50,000 was was a pie in the sky figure. It is completely arbitrary. I mean, it had no reality based on the cost of providing that education.
Exactly.
Right. And so then you've got 30,000. The kid doesn't have 30,000. He goes and borrows, whatever he can, for which, thanks to Joe Biden, a lot of it has been forgiven over the last several years.
But a lot have it. And one of the things about that, when you talk about student loans, I don't know how true this is, but I see it enough at the time that I bet it's at least somewhat true. Because people say, I borrowed $30,000 to go to college. I've been paying, I've made every payment for the last 9 years, $29,000. I can't ever get this off my books, right? So they're paying for college, throughout their working years, right? And that's not right either, right? So, I don't know how you sort it out because they agreed to do it. But I think it's like, I think one of the things that we're going to end up thanking Joe Biden for, yes, the crediting the Biden presidency for is, how could this happen? Is ending student loans, right? Because they forgave all those loans. So now you really can't make those loans because no one has the expectation that they will be required to pay them back, right? You borrow the money, you assume that like somewhere along the line, some Democrat's going to win and forgive your loan. So you can't have a loan program when people don't expect to have to pay the money back. And I know people are going, hey, PPP, but this is not PPP. PPP was designed to, you don't have to pay it back if you spend it to, keep your employees on the payroll. Those were the rules of that. So, I don't know where it's going to go, but, the accountability is coming to colleges one way or the other.
Yeah, I think one of the problems with the student loan program, though, when it comes to that, there's no doubt that students there's documented cases of where they've had borrowings for tuition, and then they've been paying for years and they've barely made a dent in the payments. And
right.
I think you have to kind of look at what kind of interest rates were charged. But I have my feeling here is that what's happened here is that they've had these interest rates that are too hard for them to deal with. But it's it's kind of a little bit like a credit card payment, where a credit card payment, you make the minimum payment, right? And or a car pay. It's like, all right, this is affordable. Okay. Oh, I borrow $30,000. I only, when I have to start paying it back, it's only going to be $350 a month or whatever. I can afford that when I go out into the working world. But what it's not explained to them, what they don't understand, is that that's probably 80% of that is probably going to go to the interest part of it,
right.
And 20% maybe to the principal. Well, if you're paying very little back on the principal, you're never going to get out of this.
Right.
You've got to get to that point where you've got to make more principal payment and work that debt down. And I think that also, I'm going to say that also goes to financial literacy, in this country as well. Is that we throw these documents in front of people who are not financially literate enough to understand.
Right. They're barely legal age to sign a contract of any kind.
Right.
And you're saying, sign up for, the only way you can go to college is to sign up for this 5 or 6 figure loan.
Right. Well, and it's made easy. I mean, look, the financial aid officers, I mean, the whole thing is this whole thing of like, okay, so now we've got your tuition bill went from 50 to 30. Oh, by the way, we've got here's all these programs you can apply for. You can apply for FAFSA and reduce it a little bit because we'll just get the money from the federal government to reduce your bill. But here's these other types of grants, and here's the student loan program, and just sign it away, and you're going to be fine. You won't have to pay a nickel until you leave college and get a job or whatever the terms and conditions are. Well, when you're 18 years old, it's like, what do you know? That sounds easy.
What do I have to do to get allowed in here? That's all you can think about, right?
I want what's going to happen to me. This was my dream school. I want in. Show me where I sign on the dotted line. Boom, done. So we have that. So there's so many issues and so many problems with all of this that it's just we could spend a whole hour or more. We could spend days on this.
But if you quit subsidizing it, they won't have any choice but to reduce the costs.
Right. No, I mean that's the thing. I mean, if you the student loan program and these other things, these are like little crutches for the colleges and universities. So we can charge whatever we want to charge because the government is basically going to fill in the blank, and we're fine. We're not going to hurt because they're not paying us. The student is not we're not holding a loan to the student. That's someone else that, we got our money, so we're fine. The student has got to deal with the servicer of the loan and take care and handle that. We don't really care about how they deal with that, right? We got our money. The issue about the loan, that's a separate issue. We got them to sign on the dotted line. That's it. We're done. We're,
what if the colleges were the ones who were making that call? Yeah. Right. What if they were the ones lending the money? So Harvard's over sitting on $53 billion. Why can't they guarantee this?
Right. Well, this is the thing. I think this is where DOGE and Trump and everything like this has exposed a major problem within higher education is the vast resources that these colleges and universities have. Now, endowments are complicated, to a certain degree. There are a lot of donors who give money in a restricted basis. We're funding this chair in this department, and this is what this is for. When my father died 20 years ago, we took some of the IRA money that would have to come out anyway. It was going to have to come out over time anyway for distribution over time. And we gave that to Brigham Young University and set up a little scholarship in his name for journalism students. And they dole out, very little money per year, but I get a report every year as to how that fund has grown. But the money I gave is restricted for that purpose. They cannot take that money and use it on some other department. It stays in that department and stays, they take care of it there. So there's a bunch of those that happen in college, but there's also, the endowments are also they're supposed to give back to the university to help fund the operations.
Right.
And the larger the endowment, the more money in theory they can kick in for operations. But if the Harvards of the world are saying it's still not enough, then I think somebody better look at saying, what's wrong with your system here?
Right.
You should
Exactly.
why can't you fund between a lower tuition or more reasonable tuition and the money you earn, percentage of the money you earn off your endowment? Why can you not fund the operations of the university or the college? but they're not. There's no incentive, right? There's no incentive for them to do this. But there's a spotlight that has been put on them, one that they don't like.
Right.
You know, they absolutely hate this. They're trying to fight back, but it's pretty hard in the public eye. When like you said, Harvard's sitting on 53 billion. It's like, how do you defend this?
Yeah,
It's
right.
like, we've got people out there making $25,000 or $50,000 a year, and they're saying like, okay, so Harvard's got $53 billion, and they're almost
They're
pleading
suing the Trump administration for cutting their funding.
Yeah. And then all the, and also it's exposed kind of all the research, how that whole thing
Right.
goes with universities and things like that as well. It's definitely thrown higher education into a tizzy about this. Trump derangement syndrome runs wide and far. I think it's the Chronicle of Higher Education. So I'm on their email list, and I get amused at it. I haven't attended one of these things yet, but they have these. I think it's about every 2 or 3 weeks. They have these seminars, or webinars about like kind of how to deal with the Trump administration. Kind of a thing like this is like they're trying to bring together educators and other things like that. I think somewhere along here I've got one of my saved tabs. Is just like they've started a whole blog or section of a website about all the things that Trump has been doing to higher education and all of this. They're in there. He's in their head. He's in their head. He's living rent free in their head.
They needed it.
Right. So Elon Musk is gone, and a lot of liberals are like, hey, that's great. But as you said, Elon was a temporary employee, designated. His time was going to be up by the end of May. That was already pretty well defined, But what he did was bring to the fore, all the kind of some of the examples of wasteful spending in government, dismantling things.
You can't unsee it anymore.
You can't. And if politicians would be honest with themselves and would actually work for us, then they would take a look at that and say, yeah, look, we need to. And quit with the scaremongering and scare tactics. Let's work on creating a smaller, better government. This government is out of control. It's like at this rate, it won't be long before we're at 10 trillion. And we will be drowning. Look, Rand Paul I think he's rightfully critical of the big beautiful bill in the sense of the spending, because one of his concerns is the interest on the debt. And
Rand Paul did nothing to stop those Biden spending bills either, right?
Right. No, look,
they're not. Once you spend that money, once you promise that money, then you have to authorize Congress to spend it, right?
Yeah, these people are not necessarily blameless, but now that you've got control, you should try to exercise some control and say, we got to do something with this. But he's been positing, it's like, okay, so if we're averaging paying 1.7% on the debt, what happens when that goes up to 3.5%? Because what we're having right now economically is we're kind of having a bond boycott, which is not a good thing. But people, they're not our bonds aren't being bought like they normally would have, and the interest rate on those is rising. So we could see the debt explode if we can't figure this out. And part of that is that for the first time in a while now, the market's now getting, they're looking at it and saying, actually, I think, we're spending too much money and somebody's got to get this under control. And I hope that happens somehow. But I don't know, politicians are politicians, and, they're always trying to, they do find ways of doing things. And, I figured, we were already in trouble when, we went from $10,000 on salt to $40,000. I'm like, that's way too much. I was willing to give a little bit, but you've just given the Democrats a blank check in blue states. So that's not what we want there at all. I did want to get to, well, and I'll let you when we're done here. I did want to get to this thing in South Korea because they just had their election that came early because the previous president, for some inexplicable reason, declared martial law, which just blew up in his face. And so we now have this election just occurred. So they now have a left-wing president. It's not the first left-wing president they've had, but he was replacing a conservative president. But this guy is definitely more China friendly and Russia friendly and everything. And having just been in Korea, and having watched a bunch of K-dramas in the past too, is like, if you've ever watched these things, the candidates, when they run, they have these banners that they're pasted throughout the city, throughout the country. And that's just, you've got your picture, you've got a number, and I guess you've got your name, and that's about it. And then they hold these little rallies and whatever and things like that. So, as I've been taxied around, when I was taxied around to Korea, I just see number 1, number 4, number 3. It's like, for me, it's like, I have no idea who these people are. The South Koreans probably did, but they're cheering on. The reaction is, okay, this is great. We've got this new guy in, but you better watch out. What you voted for
who
here.
You choose as friends and all that.
Yeah, because he's like, he's warning that they should not be as dependent upon America. But South Korea needs America. So
right, like few others in the world.
Right.
On the other hand, Poland went the other way, elected a conservative.
Oh, that's right. That was the other one. I was thinking, like, what the other one? Because I put how Wilders had pulled out of the coalition in the Netherlands and stuff like that. But that was the one I was trying to remember. Yeah, I think that was the one where the guy won, but I don't think they were expecting him to win, right?
Well, I mean, it's like they were going to try to pull a Romania. And just, that's like how Joe Biden got into office. Was one of those deals. But the polls are like, nope, we're not doing that. He wins. It probably wasn't even as close as what's being reported.
All right. Well, that's interesting. All right. Well, let's go ahead and close it off. Now, let you run through a few things. We're close enough to the end.
Let's see what we have here to run through. Trump's steel tariff. So what Trump is doing there is he is trying to protect U.S. steel. He just let Nippon buy U.S. steel. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. That's essentially where we're headed. The other thing about the leftist governments in South Korea is that they fail quickly and are replaced pretty quickly. So just we'll say that about that. Where were we? We were on
steel tariff.
Steel tariffs. He's waiting for Nippon to get its way in there. They make steel in a more efficient way, and they believe that they can keep all the U.S. steel mills viable and all those people working. So, and they've made some pretty big promises on that. So, I think you will see some, not total relief on that in the fairly near future. Colorado terror attack. I think it's safe to say that virtually all the domestic terrorism in the U.S. is emanating from the left now. I think it's hard to argue otherwise. SPLC, Southern Poverty Law Center, named Turning Point USA, a hate group. Yeah, you can't help but laugh. I mean, the jokes write themselves. They did some. People don't realize this, but they really did some valuable work back years ago. Morris Dees back in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, showing, okay, we're getting away from Jim Crow, right? We're integrating the schools, we're integrating society, but here are these people under the radar who are perpetuating, racial dominance and whatnot, right? Racial hatred. So, but now it is, it's just leftists declaring anybody they don't like haters, right? Like they're not the biggest haters. Bill Clinton, I don't know that I believe that he didn't see Biden's decline. I don't know if I buy that one. Santa Ono won't be the next University of Florida president. I don't, I guess the last place he was, he dismantled the DEI program promptly after being told to. But I don't understand why they, read the room, right? But, DeSantis has taken over one college, right? And he has remade the boards and stuff of everybody he could appoint. he appointed and fired the people who were in their place to try to turn those schools in a different direction. And then to go appoint a leftist president makes no sense. Scott Pelley's commencement speech was, everything you've always mocked about left-wing media in one speech, right? And just the outrage and the performative nonsense. Really sickening, but that's what they call intellectual power on their side now. Elon Musk is making noise about the one big beautiful bill. He's right. They didn't get far enough into it, but also, we didn't get in this, like we discussed, we didn't get this mess in a day, and we won't get out of it in a day, right? It's going to take a series of measures. So if you get this one over the finish line, then you go to the next one, you go to the next one. Now they have a rescission package that, you're going to get NPR, PBS, and you're going to get some other stuff taken out, not spent on anymore. So foreign aid stuff. So it'll be good. And I would like to close out by talking about those LSUS pilots. That's where I went to school. And they, when I was there, I was on a commission where we studied whether to have an intercollegiate sports program at all. And what we suggested was low level, like we're in NAIA, right? Competition for everything to start, and then try to build up basketball where you could go bigger time in that. And they really haven't done that. It's really stayed low level. It's all NAIA, but they're very good at it. They were in the Final Four of basketball. Their women won the conference. Women's basketball team won the conference. And then the baseball team went 59-0 and won the national championship. And you think about baseball, all the sports, like, the Rockies have won 2 in a row now, right? They're up to 11 whole wins. So baseball, it's a freaky thing. The Rockies can go 9-50 and then go 2-0. So it's hard to dodge all the bullets in baseball, but they did. They managed to do it. They overcame leads. They overcame a lead to win the national championship. And Speaker Mike Johnson invited them to the White House. So at some point, they are coming up to see Trump. And I don't have friends that work down there, and I never pull strings, but I'm thinking about pulling a string on this one.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's like, I expect to see you there.
Yeah, this one I got to try to go to.
Yeah, find those strings and pull them, please. Yeah, no, that's a great story. It really is. It's to see that it's, those kind of 59-0 record in baseball, remarkable. Anytime you can go undefeated, in virtually any sport these days, that's pretty remarkable, because the road can be pretty tough in all levels of sports. And so, it's, we just saw, what was it, Oklahoma, softball, women's softball. I mean, they've had dominance for years and they got knocked out. So
right, like baseball, like what, 7 or 9 SEC teams wiped out in the first weekend.
Yeah.
But LSU Baton Rouge did survive, so they move on.
Yeah. Okay. So I apparently gave you another bone I didn't know about.
Yeah, it was close.
All right, everyone. All right. That's fun. It's always fun to end like that. Yeah. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Please, as always, stay safe and stay well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And as always, God bless America, and we will see you again next week.